If you want to know whether your cockerel's fertile and whether you'll get plenty of chicks this year, this is the video for you. Hello, welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to the avian influenza prevention zone. Welcome to chicken fertility. Every year we bring a new cockerel into our flock from somebody else's flock. We hatch the eggs ourselves, but we hatch out a new cockerel for our flock. Now that begs a couple of questions, doesn't it? One, well, why do we replace the cockerel every year? And two, why do we only have one cockerel? Well, let's see if we can answer them very briefly. Scientists have discovered that if you have less than about 150 individuals in a colony or a flock or a group, they will eventually interbreed to the point of causing unwanted genetic mutations. And obviously we don't want that in our chicken flock. So we have to add new genes to the chicken flock all the time. And the way we do that is replacing the cockerel. So as we've said, we hatch out a new cockerel from other reputable breeders each year. So the second question then is, well, why do we only have one cockerel? Well, our core breeding flock is about 8 or 9 Buff Orpington hens. And if we have more than one cockerel in with that, what will happen is that they will overtread the hens, they will vie with each other, they will fight, and they will eventually cause physical damage. So we can only have one cockerel with our breeding hen flock. It needs to be a different cockerel, and if we keep that cockerel for more than 1 year, by the second year, it'll be breeding with its own offspring, and that causes the interbreeding that we're seeking to avoid. So it's one cockerel each year, a new one each year, but we have to make sure that that one cockerel we've got is fertile. And today we're going to discuss exactly how we do that. Before we start talking a great deal about the mating strategies and how we test fertility, we need to understand a bit about chicken anatomy. Now, chickens have a very different kind of body structure than mammals. So with one of the hens, for example, what you're going to find is that at the back end of a hen, there's a single all-purpose outlet called the cloaca, or you'll also hear it called the vent. So anything that goes into a chicken goes in through the beak, anything that comes out through the cloaca. And hens don't really urinate. What happens is any waste material that comes out, if they've had a lot of liquid, it's runny. If they haven't had a lot of liquid, it's solid. But it's the same orifice that the egg comes out of. Now, that is also true of the cockerels. Cockerels do not have a penis. So when he wants to release sperm, he does it through his cloaca. So what you've got to imagine is actually the mating is quite a complicated arrangement, because they've both got a cloaca. With these heavy feathered breeds, they're buried deep in amongst the feathers. They have to bring them together and get all the feathers out of the way for successful fertilisation to occur. Let's talk a little bit about treading. When we're bringing our young cockerels on, we need to think about fertility testing when they start treading hens. And treading is the act of fertilisation. You can see it happen. Often a hen will present. She'll be sitting there and saying to the cockerel, "I'm ready for mating," and she'll crouch down, she'll raise her shoulders as he comes in behind her. He'll often do a little bit of a dance and make a noise. She'll present to him. He will then climb onto her back, often stabilise himself by gripping with his beak onto her neck or onto her comb, and then they will bring their cloacas together, sperm will pass between them, and fertilisation will occur. Now, it's quite a tricky process, to be fair. It often takes place on an uneven surface. They've got no arms to stabilise themselves with, and the cockerel will do his best to stay on her back, but if she's uncooperative, the surface is uneven, it doesn't always work successfully. So they will tread the hens repeatedly in order to make sure that successful fertilisation has occurred. Now, we have in the past had one cockerel who used to climb onto the hens backwards. That was really very amusing to watch. Unfortunately, it didn't do anything for a successful fertilisation. So what we're testing for when we test fertilisation is not only that the cockerel is physically capable of fertilising the hen, but also that his technique is right and he's actually getting the job done. So what is the actual process for testing fertility? Well, remember we said that fertilisation will last for 7 days. So the first thing you've got to make sure of is your chosen cockerel, Ramesses in this case, is kept with some hens, and no other cockerels have access to those hens for a good 10 days to make sure that any fertilisation that's happening is happening from Ramesses. So in this enclosure, we have Ramesses only with our Buff Orpington hens. If you look through the back, you can see another enclosure, and in that enclosure are all our egg layer hens, as we call them, our copper black morans, our crusty cream leg bars, our old English pheasant fowl, and they're in with Ra, who's our alternate cockerel. So what we're going to do is gather up some eggs from the Buff Orpingtons, and we're going to incubate them for around 7 days, and if we can see signs of fertility, we know that's caused by Ramesses. At the same time, we'll take some of the eggs from the morans and from the old English pheasant fowl, we'll incubate those, and if those are fertile, it must be Ra. That's the process by which we can determine which cockerels are fertile and how well they're treating the hens. So fertility testing, how does it work? Well, briefly, incubate the eggs for 7 days, put them on a candle, shine a bright light through them and look for signs of development. That's how it works. We incubate using one of these. That's a Brinze Ovation Advanced 28, holds 28 hens eggs. My one bit of advice, don't buy cheap incubators. We started with a cheap Chinese one. I know lots of other people haven't. Everyone I know has regretted it. You get really poor hatch rates because their thermostats aren't great, their humidity management isn't great, and I'm not going to go into all the principles of incubation, but trust me, cheap ones don't do it well and they cost you money in the long term. The candler, just a very bright light, a little cup for the egg to sit in. We use one called a Titan candler. Been absolutely brilliant since the day we bought it. Really recommend it, wouldn't see any need to change. And I'll put a link in the description below to our area for chicken keeping tools. If you're interested in them, you can look them up. Let's take a very brief look at how to set up the incubator, and then we'll show you candling Ramesses and Ra's eggs. This is our incubator. An incubator needs to do 3 things, and I'm very quickly going to run over them. It needs to maintain the right temperature, you need to keep the humidity correct, and the eggs need to be turned. Now at its simplest level with an incubator, you can get the old-fashioned ones which were sort of polystyrene boxes that had a thermostatic heater, and everything else you had to do. You had to monitor and measure the humidity, you in some cases even had to monitor the temperature, and you had to turn the eggs by hand. And that's fine, and it works, but honestly it becomes a chore after a while. So this one, what it does is it monitors and manages the temperature for you, it automatically turns the eggs, and it monitors the humidity and lets you adjust the amount of water in reservoirs inside to keep it at the correct level. So temperature is monitored by that. Let's have a look inside and I will show you motion and humidity. Inside the incubator there are 4 cradles. You can get different types of cradles for different size of eggs, because clearly a quail's egg is an entirely different size than a hen's egg. It needs its own size of cradle. And you can run the incubator with just 1 cradle, 2 cradles, 3 cradles, as many or as few as you like. When the incubator is going, every 45 minutes a little motor in the housing unit turns on this bar, and it will rock the cradles one way. 45 minutes later it'll move again and rock them the other way. And that mimics the action of the hen turning the eggs underneath her, and it stops the developing chicks sticking to the shell. In the bottom of the incubator are 2 little reservoirs, and you can put water in them and you can partially cover them to adjust the amount of water that's evaporating, and that will regulate the humidity in the incubator. And that's pretty much it. There's not much more to incubation than that. And all we're going to do is incubate these eggs for 7 days and look for signs of development. Getting the incubator going is really easy. First things first, fill the reservoirs with water. I use one of those little sort of 1.5 litre indoor watering cans for that because it makes life easier. Next, fit the cover to one of those reservoirs. That allows you to adjust surface area and how much water is evaporating and changing the humidity rating which the machine will give you. I've only fitted 2 cradles on this occasion. I'm going to use 1 cradle for the Buff Orpingtons, and we're only doing 4 eggs just for the first test. And what you'll notice is they keep falling over. So we push a bit of bubble wrap into the end of their cradle just to keep them snugged up and the right way up. In the other cradle I've got 7 eggs. We've got a couple of eggs from the Morans and 5 from the Old English pheasant fowl that are quite a bit smaller, as you can see. So they still need a little bit of bubble wrap to keep them safe and secure. Finally, plug it in, switch it on, and it will sort itself out. All I might need to do is check and adjust that sliding cover to get the humidity right. Here's our candler. Just a couple of things to point out that I think are important for the way we raise birds. Most important, it's a battery powered unit. So when we have a broody hen that's come off her eggs because she wants something to eat, something to drink, we can take the candler to the coop and candle her eggs in situ and remove any that are infertile. How does it work? You press a button, a bright light comes on. On top of that light, there's a rubber fitting that you sit the egg in and shine the light through it, and you can see what's going on inside the egg. In this unit, you get 2 different rubber fittings for different sizes of egg. And I find it works much better always candling in a dark place, a dark room, if you possibly can, because it's easier to see the details of what's inside the egg. But that's candling. It isn't complicated. Let's start by looking at an infertile egg on our candling. That's what they look like. If you look at the bottom, that's where the white of the egg is, and at the top there's a slightly, but only slightly darker area, and that's the yolk. So we're going to start off now by having a look at the Buff Orpingtons. So a lot of people will tell you shouldn't candle till 7 to 10 days, but we find that we can tell the difference. So take a close look at this. Can you see a difference? Can you see how much smaller the white is at the egg? And can you see that dark spot in the much larger area that's the same sort of colour as the yolk was? That spot is the start of a developing fetus. And if you look very carefully, can you see faint lines around it? That's the beginning of a circulatory system. And you can see that at just 4 days. Now, here's another one. Can you see? There we've got a little dark spot and a much smaller area of white. So everything is looking really good for development on the Buff Orpingtons. Third one, there you go. Can you see it? See that little spot in the middle at the top? So I think it is fairly clear to see that Ramesses, who's been in with the Buff Orpington hens, is definitely doing his job, and we're seeing really top flight fertility. In fact, all 4 were fertile. Now, we're going to look at the others, and this is one of the Moran's eggs. They're trickier to candle. They've got a dark shell, a thick shell, and it's a speckled shell, and all of that makes it extremely difficult. But if we turn the light off, I think you'll be able to see, you can still see a difference. So off we go with a light. Now then, it's harder to see, but there's a small area of white at the bottom, and there is a much darker, larger area at the top, and that clearly shows some fertility. Unfortunately, very few of the Old English pheasant fowl were fertile. We recandled all the eggs at 7 days. From Ra's point of view, both of the copper black Moran eggs were fertile, and 1 of the 5 Old English pheasant fowl eggs were fertile. The other 4 look just like this. So that's giving Ra a score of under 50% fertility. So let's take a look instead at the 4 Buff Orpington eggs. They all look like this. Ramesses has achieved 100% fertilisation on his initial test. At 7 days, can you see the much larger, darker area at the top of the egg? And you can probably see some movement. And that's the material moving partially because the warmth is changing inside the egg. You can also see lines showing the very early stages of circulatory development. So Ramesses is definitely doing his job. Well, after 1 test, it's clear that Ramesses is not only fertile, but he's performing extremely well. Because we sell fertilised eggs, we like to be uber cautious. So we're going to take another 7 eggs just from the Orpingtons, just checking Ramesses. We're going to incubate them for 7 full days, and if that result comes back well, then we're certain that Ramesses is our breeding cockerel for this year. That's our approach to chicken breeding. Testing fertility, making sure the genetics are healthy, and this is Ramesses, and he's our breeding cockerel for 2021. If you've enjoyed today's video, can you spare us 5 seconds and give us a thumbs up down below? If you'd like to hear more about the logic and the thought and the science that we put into small holding, tell us in the comments, tell us what particularly interests you, and we'll try and make those kind of videos. If you'd like to see them and every other video we produce, just hit subscribe and the bell next to it. You'll hear every time we upload a new video. But whatever you do, come back and see us soon. Take care.